Morning. Well, the book I was reading the other day got deleted on the YouTube, so we have to do it again. Let's find where we were. Yeah, okay. We were reading Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging. It's a book by Sebastian Junger. Well, he's basically talking about what's the benefits of having a tribal life, basically. So the psychological, I was on page 268. So I'll continue from there. The psychological effect of placing such importance on affluence can be seen in microcosm in the legal profession. In 2015, the George Washington Law Review surveyed more than 6,000 lawyers and found that conventional success in the legal profession, such as high billable hours or making partner at a law firm, had zero correlation with the levels of happiness and well-being reported by the lawyers themselves. In fact, public defenders who have far lower status than corporate lawyers seem to lead significantly happier lives. The findings are in keeping with something called self-determination theory, which holds that human beings need three basic things in order to be content. They need to feel competent at what they do, they need to feel authentic in their lives, and they need to feel connected to others. These values are considered intrinsic to human happiness and far outweigh extrinsic values such as beauty, money, and status. Bluntly put, modern society seems to emphasize extrinsic values over intrinsic ones, and as a result, mental health issues refuse to decline with growing wealth. The more assimilated a person is into American society, the more likely they are to develop depression during the course of their lifetime, regardless of what ethnicity they are. Mexicans born in the United States are wealthier than the Mexicans born in Mexico, but far more likely to suffer from depression. Like corporate lawyers, they may have a harder time achieving the three pillars of self determination: autonomy, competence, and community. They wind up with a higher rate of depression. By contrast, Amish society has an exceedingly low rate of depression because it is theorized many Amish remain utterly unassimilated into modern society to the extent that they won't even drive cars. The economic and marketing forces of modern society have engineered an environment that maximizes consumption at the long term cost of well being. A study in the Journal of Affective Disorders concluded in 2012. In effect, humans have dragged a body with a long hominid history into an overfed, malnourished, sedentary, sunlight deficient, sleep deprived, competitive, inequitable, and socially isolating environment with dire consequences. The alienating effects of wealth and modernity on the human experience start virtually at birth and never let up. Infants in hunter gatherer societies are carried by their mothers as much as 90% of the time, which roughly corresponds to carrying rates among other primates. One can get an idea how important this kind of touch is to primates from an infamous experiment conducted in the 1950s by a primatologist and psychologist named Harry Harlow. Baby rhesus monkeys were separated from their mothers and presented with choice of two kinds of surrogates, a cuddly mother made out of a terry cloth or an uninviting mother made out of wire mesh. The wire mesh mother, however, had a nipple that dispensed warm milk. The babies took their nourishment as quickly as possible and then rushed back to cling to the terry cloth mother, which had enough softness to provide the illusion of affection. Clearly, touch and closeness are vital to the health of baby primates, including humans. In America during 1970s, mothers maintained skin-to-skin contact with babies as little as 16% of the time, which is a level that traditional societies would probably consider a form of child abuse. Also unthinkable would be the modern practice of making young children sleep by themselves. In two American studies of middle class families during 1980s, 85% of young children slept alone in their own room, a figure that rose to 95% among families considered well educated. Northern European societies, including America, are the only ones in history to make very young children sleep alone in such numbers. The isolation is thought to make many children bond intensely with stuffed animals for reassurance. Only in Northern European societies do children go through the well known developmental stage of bonding with stuffed animals. Elsewhere, children get their sense of safety from the adults sleeping near them. The point of making children sleep alone, according to Western psychologists, is to make them self soothing. But that clearly runs contrary to our evolution. Humans are primates. We share 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees, and primates almost never leave infants unattended because they would be extremely vulnerable to predators. Infants seem to know this instinctively, so being left alone in a dark room is terrifying to them. Compare the self soothing approach to that of a traditional Mayan community in Guatemala. Infants and children simply fall asleep when sleepy, do not wear specific sleep clothes, or use traditional transitional objects, room share and co sleep with parents or siblings and nurse on demand during the night. Another study notes about Bali. Babies are encouraged to acquire quickly the capacity to sleep under any circumstances, including situations of high stimulation musical performances and other noisy observances, which reflect their more complete integration into adult social activities. As modern society reduced the role of community, it simultaneously elevated the role of authority. The two are uneasy companions, and as one goes up, the other tends to go down. In 2007, anthropologist Christopher Boehm published an analysis of 154 foraging societies that were deemed to be representative of our ancestral past, and one of their most common traits was the absence of major wealth disparities between individuals. Another was the absence of arbitrary authority. Social life is a politically egalitarian in that there is always a low tolerance by a group's mature males for one of their number dominating, bossing, or denigrating the others. Boehm observed. The human conscious evolved in the middle to late Plis- Pleistocene as a result of the hunting of large game. This required cooperative band level sharing of meat. Because tribal foragers are highly mobile and can easily shift between different communities, the authority is almost impossible to impose on the unwilling. And even without that option, males who try to take control of the group or of the food supply are often countered by coalitions of other males. This is clearly an ancient and adaptive behavior that tends to keep groups together and equitably cared for. In his survey of ancestral type societies, Boehm found that, in addition to murder and theft, one of the most commonly published infractions was failure to share. Freeloading on the hard work of others and bullying were also high up on the list. Punishments included public ridicule, shunning, and finally assassination of the culprit by the entire group. A cave painting from early Holocene in Spain shows 10 figures with bows in their hands and a lone figure prone on the ground with what appear to be 10 arrows sticking out of him. The configuration strongly suggests an execution rather than death in combat. Boehm points out that among current day foraging groups, group execution is one of the most common ways of punishing males who try to claim a disproportionate amount of the group's resources. Boehm's research has led him to believe that much of the evolutionary basis for moral behavior stems from group pressure. Not only are bad actions punished, but good actions are rewarded. When a person does something for another person, a pro social act as it's called, they are rewarded not only by group approval but also by an increase of dopamine and other pleasurable hormones in their blood. Group cooperation triggers higher levels of oxytocin, for example, which promotes everything from breastfeeding in women to higher levels of trust and group bonding in men. Both reactions impart a powerful sensation of well being. Oxytocin creates a feedback loop of good feeling and group loyalty that ultimately leads members to self sacrifice to promote group welfare. In the words of one study, hominids that cooperated with one another and punished those who did not must have outfought, outhunted, and outbred everyone else. These are the hominids that modern humans are descended from. It's revealing then to look at the modern society through the prism of more than a million years of human cooperation and resource sharing. Subsistence level hunters aren't necessarily more moral than other people. They just can't get away with selfish behavior because they live in small groups where almost everything is open to scrutiny. Modern society, on the other hand, is sprawling and anonymous mess where people can get away with incredible levels of dishonesty without getting caught. What tribal people would consider a profound betrayal of the group, modern society simply dismisses it as fraud. Around 3% of people on unemployment assistance intentionally cheat the system. For example, which costs the United States more than $2 billion a year. Such abuse would be immediately punished in tribal society. Fraud in welfare and other entitlement programs is estimated to be roughly the same rate, which adds another $1.5 billion in annual losses. That figure, however, is eclipsed by Medicare and Medicaid fraud, which is conservatively estimated at 10% of total payments, or around $100 billion a year. Some estimates run to two or three times that figure. Fraud in the insurance industry is calculated to be $100 billion to 300 billion a year, a cost that gets passed directly to the consumers in the form of higher insurance premiums. All told, combined public and private sector fraud costs every household in the United States probably around $5,000 a year, or roughly the equivalent of working 4 months at a minimum wage job. A hunter gatherer community that lost 4 months' worth of food would face a serious threat to its survival and its retribution against the people who caused the hardship would be immediate and probably very violent. Westerners live in a complex society and opportunities for scamming relatively small amounts of money off the bottom are almost endless and very hard to catch. But scamming large amounts of money but scamming large amounts of money off the top seems even harder to catch. Fraud by American defense contractors is estimated at around $100 billion per year, and they are relatively well behaved compared to the financial industry. The FBI reports that since the economic recession of 2008, securities and commodities fraud in the United States has gone up by more than 50%. In the decade prior, almost 90% of corporate fraud cases, insider trading, kickbacks and bribes, false accounting, implicated the company's chief executive officer or chief financial officer. The recession, which was triggered by illegal and unwise banking practices, cost American shareholders several trillion dollars in stock value losses and is thought to have set the American economy back by a decade and a half. Total costs for recession have been estimated to be as high as $14 trillion, or about $45,000 per citizen. Most tribal and subsistence level societies would inflict severe punishments on anyone who caused that kind of damage. Cowardice is another form of community betrayal, and most Indian tribes punished it with immediate death. If that seems harsh, consider that British military took cowards off the battlefield and executed them by firing squad as late as World War I. It can be assumed that hunter gatherers would treat their version of a welfare cheat or a dishonest banker as decisively as they would a coward. They may not kill him, but he would certainly be banished from the community. The fact that a group of people can cost American society several trillion dollars in losses, roughly one quarter of that year's gross domestic product, and not to be tried for high crimes shows how completely detribalized the country has become. Dishonest bankers and welfare or insurance cheats are the modern equivalent of tribe members who quietly steal more than their fair share of meat or other resources. This is very different from alpha males who bully others and openly steal resources. Among hunter gatherers, bullying males are often faced down by coalitions of other senior males but that rarely happens in modern society. For years, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission has been trying to force senior corporate executives to disclose the ratio of their pay to that of their median employees. During the 1960s, the senior executives in America typically made around $20 for every dollar earned by a rank and file worker. Since then, that figure has climbed to 300 to 1 among S&P 500 companies, and in some cases it goes far higher than that. The US Chamber of Commerce managed to block all attempts to force disclosure of corporate pay ratios until 2015, when a weakened version of the rule was finally passed by the SEC in a strict party line vote of 3 Democrats in favor and 2 Republicans opposed. In hunter gatherer terms, these senior executives are claiming a disproportionate amount of food simply because they have power to do so. A tribe like the Kung would not permit that because it would represent a serious threat to group cohesion and survival. But that is not true for a wealthy country like the United States. There have been occasional demonstrations against the economic disparity, like the Occupy Wall Street protest camp of 2011, but they were generally peaceful and ineffective. The riots the riots and demonstrations against racial discrimination that later took place in Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, Maryland, led to changes in part because they attained a level of violence that threatened the civil order. A deep and enduring economic crisis like the Great Depression of the 1930s or a natural disaster that kills tens of thousands of people might change America's fundamental calculus about economic justice. Until then, the American public will probably continue to refrain from broadly challenging both male and female corporate leaders who compensate themselves far in excess of their value to society. That is ironic because the political origins of the United States lay in confronting pres- precisely this kind of resource seizure by people in power. King George III King George III of England caused the English colonies in America to rebel by trying to tax them without allowing them a voice in government. In this case, democratic revolutions are just formalized version of the sort of group action that coalitions of senior males have used throughout the ages to confront greed and abuse. Thomas Paine, one of the principal architects of American democracy, wrote a formal denunciation of civilization in a tract called Agrarian Justice. Whether civilization has most promoted or most injured the general happiness of man is a question that may be strongly contested. And the most miserable of the human race are to be found in the countries that are called civilized. When Paine wrote his tract, Shawnee and Delaware warriors were still attacking settlements just a few hundred miles from downtown Philadelphia. They held scores of white captives, many of whom had been adopted into the tribe and had no desire to return to colonial society. There is no way to know the effect on Paine's thought process of living next door to a communal Stone Age society, but it might have been crucial. Paine acknowledged that these tribes lacked the advantages of the arts and science and manufacturing, and yet they lived in a society where personal poverty was unknown and natural rights of a man were actively promoted. In that sense, Paine claimed The American Indian should serve as a model for how to eradicate poverty and bring natural rights back into the civilized life. Now, well, I am reading a book by Sebastian Junger. Uh, it's about tribe on homecoming and a new beginning. Well, I'm interested in building my own vocabulary skills, oratory skills, and put it on YouTube, on Instagram to bring it to my subscribers. Well, if anybody wants me to do voiceovers for their websites, if you like my voice, well, just DM me, contact me through YouTube, contact me on Instagram, and I will be ready to work with you guys. And I continue reading the books. The book reading is a promotional thing, which is to bring my own speaking, to improve my own speaking basically. Because it's a way of interaction. So I found it out that if I want to have more English vocabulary skills, this might help me. So yeah, very good. I think you all will like and enjoy, even if you watch 5 minutes of it, and get back to me through Instagram and YouTube. Thank you very much for watching.